Hey guys, Jeff here. Now, what I want to talk about today... Oops. Sorry about that. I think I got raptured for a second. Now, I don't know about you, but growing up in the 90s, the Rapture was insanely popular. I think that those books were some of the best-selling books of all time. There's been a resurgence lately, though, because of the Left Behind movie that just came out. So I actually want to dig a little deeper, say, where does that come from? What's going on there? And I want to actually argue how I think it's a little problematic when it comes to hope as a Christian believer. Like, honestly, I still think back to when I was a kid, and I remember I was terrified that I would come home or show up at school and I would be the only one left behind. I even had nightmares sometimes of Nikolai Carpathia. If that rings a bell, then you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. Now, because the book sold so well and because of the culture is so pervasive, I think we think that's just biblical or that it's been around forever. But there's a few things to note that are really interesting. First, it didn't really become popular till about the 1820s with a guy named John Darby. He actually claimed that there was a girl who had a vision similar to Rapture theology that then he, as a Bible teacher, made it very, very popular and began teaching it. And another interesting thing is if you actually look at countries outside of America or the Western First World perspective, a lot of different countries and different churches across the globe actually think we're very weird for our Rapture theology. They don't hold to the exact same expression that we do. So we have to pause there and think for a minute, okay, if this is only about 200 years old and it's only in the Western world, maybe there's something off there, or maybe it's not totally true. Now, the two main things that I think we get wrong about this idea or that are problematic is first, the idea that it kind of supports an idea of Gnosticism or dualism. And then secondly, one of the main verses we get Rapture theology is from 1 Thessalonians 4, and I think there's actually something else going on there. Now, first, dualism or Gnosticism. Now, that idea has been around for a long time and it's been declared a heresy for actually hundreds of years, but it actually is this idea where basically at the fundamental root, it's saying that spirit is good, body is evil, meaning any physical matter is wrong or it's evil. It's all about the varsity Christian or the varsity level of spirituality is everything that's spirit or everything that's non-physical. Now, what's interesting is the Left Behind theology or Rapture theology kind of feeds that. Really, if you summarize the Rapture or Rapture theology at its finest points, it basically is saying that there's going to come a time in the future where God is going to rapture or snatch or take his church out of the world, all the people that are elect or all the people that follow him or all the believers, and he's basically going to leave the earth to just implode. There's going to be tribulations and a bunch of stuff there, but it's basically just going to burn up and it's going to get left behind, but God is going to ultimately take the people he wants out of that before he destroys the world. Now, it kind of paints this picture that we're all just kind of floating in the sky with harps and there's babies and diapers with wings and all these things, which, by the way, I always like to say, if you see a baby with wings on it, that's not heaven. I would actually probably run if I ever saw that. That's creepy, right? But it feeds this idea of Gnosticism or dualism in that, again, the earth is evil, the earth is bad, and it's all about a higher level of spirituality where there's no physical form or there's no physical substance. And now, before we get to how I think Jesus answers that problem, let's get to the last one. The last issue is 1 Thessalonians 4. Now, if you look at that text, it basically is Paul trying to use any imagery he has to try to show the hope that a Christian has. And he uses this phrase that basically says, when the trumpet blows, we will all be snatched in the sky, those who are alive, to meet the Lord in the air. Now, there's a lot of things going on there. First of all, there would have been some Moses and Old Testament imagery there with the trumpet being blown when he goes up on the hill and then comes down the hill when he gets the Torah. But also one thing that we totally don't recognize that's going on there is there's a ton of imperial overtones. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of royal things going on there that, again, anyone in the first century, because that was the world they were living in, would have totally understood that we've totally missed. When you actually look at that verse in context, I would argue, rather than it advocating that we're getting pulled out of this world, I would actually argue it almost proves the opposite, that God is going to fully redeem, restore, and heal this place and bring us down and live with him in the final hope. When Paul says that the trumpets are going to blow and we're going to be called up into the sky with Jesus, the reason it says that is because that's the way Jesus left, meaning in his ascension, he left in the sky, and so that's the same place he's going to return for the final hope and the full restoration and reconciliation of all things. Now, why is that interesting? Okay, again, in first century, you have to understand that this was very Roman, this is very colonial, this is very imperial, and what I mean by that is you can see this picture probably in Gladiator or anything of that nature, but let's say Caesar, for example. If Caesar's going off to war, the city or the colony basically will usher that king or usher Caesar out to the city gates. It's kind of like a farewell, basically saying go get him or whatever it is, and they will send him off into battle or into that interim period. And then if the war is victorious and the war is won, then what happens is those people actually meet the king or meet Caesar at the city gates when he's returning. They meet him at the outside, by the way, and they kind of usher him out of respect into his throne, back into the palace, back into the place where he's going going to finally dwell. And so you see that picture with Jesus and Paul, where Paul's basically saying, yeah, at the end of time, the same way he left is the same way he's going to come back. And when everything is fully restored and reconciled, we're going to be snatched up in the air and then usher him back down to where heaven and earth will finally be one again. That's his true throne, that's his true dwelling place, and that's Revelation 21 and 22 basically summarized. See, the problem with the rapture is it actually becomes really problematic because a lot of Christians just want to hide out and kind of just hold on really tight and get out of this evil place. When no, God actually wants us to come alongside him in restoring and renewing and reconciling this place with justice and mercy and grace and love for our neighbors and everyone around us. So if I can summarize the Bible really quickly from a 30,000 foot level, which that is our hope, by the way, is that God created heaven and earth as kind of two dimensions, but married. They were fully one. They were on top of each other. They were together. God's space and our space were fully one, like a marriage. But sin happens and it broke those spaces. It ripped those spaces apart. But God promises through Abraham and through prophets, says, no, I'm going to fully restore that. I'm going to enact a rescue operation to put heaven and earth back together so I can dwell with my people. And Jesus is obviously the crescendo of this, where he finally links them back together in his resurrection. He starts this new world. He offers grace and forgiveness and hope. And then we're in that interim period where God, through Jesus, is restoring the world, asks us to come alongside him and help him in that mission as well. And then when you get to the end in Revelation 21 and 22, you see that the hope is not, again, babies with wings and harps and clouds and this utter floating spirituality, but it's this fullness. There's actually resurrected bodies. Our hope is resurrection. It's not floating in spirituality. And then you also see that heaven comes down to earth, the phrase it uses, as a bride adorned for her husband. There's that marriage again in heaven and earth. So God is putting heaven and earth back together in Jesus. He calls us alongside to that. And then we see the trajectory he's going. We see the finish line, and we're supposed to look at our lives and say, is my life on that trajectory? Is that the hope I'm clinging to? And is that the hope I'm offering? That Jesus is going to one day make everything right, fully restore and fully redeem heaven and earth. Hey guys, thanks for watching that video. I want to give a quick thank you to our sponsor for this video, Harry's. Now, if you don't know Harry's, let me start with this. A lot of people actually ask, how do I get my perfectly straight lined hair? I actually do it myself, and it takes very, very precise tools. I will say that. But Harry's is actually a shaving company. They are absolutely incredible. They're almost half the price of going to the drugstore, getting really cheap blades, but they offer even better products. And the cool part about Harry's is they hooked us up, and if you go to harrys.com and you use the promo code Jeff, they'll give you $5 off on your order. Now, what's awesome about Harry's is they're basically these kits that are beautifully packaged. I would almost go far to say they're sexy in their packaging. You get the shaving cream, you get the razors, you get all these things, and the cool part is it's free shipping and it's delivered right to your door. So check them out, harrys.com, use the promo code Jeff, and they'll hook you up. Oh yeah, and in the meantime, don't forget to subscribe, check out my store for shirts, posters, books, etc., and then also my poems on iTunes down there. That's all I got. Talk to you later.